Sarah Chen walked through the massive doors of the Galactic Council building. Her black suit was perfect. Her hair was neat. But inside she felt angry. Today would be her last day as Earth's ambassador. The council chamber was huge. Hundreds of alien beings sat in rows that went up to the ceiling. Most of them looked down at her with cold eyes. The Vorthak reptiles showed their sharp teeth. The crystal beings called the Nexus made clicking sounds that meant they were annoyed. Sarah had been coming to this place for 10 years. She had tried to make peace. She had made deals. She had given up things that Earth needed. But it was never enough for the council. The big screen in front of her showed the new law they wanted to pass. Resolution 2847. Sarah read it again, even though it made her sick. All humans had to leave the outer spiral planets, every single one. Millions of people who had lived there for generations would lose their homes. Counselor Vorthak Prime stood up. He was 8 feet tall with green scales and yellow eyes. When he spoke, his voice was like a snake. The human species is too violent. For the frontier worlds, they must be moved to safer areas where we can watch them. Sarah felt her hands shake with anger. Too violent? Humans had not started a war in 200 years. They had followed every rule the council made. They had cut their military down to almost nothing, and this was how the council thanked them. Nexus 7 spoke next. The crystal being had no mouth, but its voice came from speakers around the room. Humans show too much aggression. Our studies prove they cannot be trusted with valuable resources. Other council members nodded. The bird-like Altarians clicked their beaks. The gas creatures from Titan Prime floated higher in their tanks. They all agreed. Humans were the problem. Sarah stood up slowly. The chamber became quiet. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a folder. Inside were papers that would change. Everything? Honorable council members, she began. Her voice was calm, but everyone could hear the anger underneath. For 200 years, humanity has tried to be part of this council. We have followed your laws. We have given up our weapons. We have moved our people when you asked. We have shared our technology and our resources. She opened the folder and held up the papers. But today that ends, Vorthak Prime hissed. You cannot refuse a council order, human. Your species has no choice. Sarah smiled, but it was not a happy smile. You are right. We have no choice. So we are making a new choice. She placed the papers on the central table where everyone could see them. The human species officially withdraws from the Galactic Council. We quit. The chamber exploded with noise. Aliens shouted and clicked and hissed. But Sarah kept talking, her voice getting louder. We came here in peace. We wanted to be friends. We gave you everything you asked for. Our ships, our weapons, our planets. We thought if we were peaceful enough, you would accept us. She paused and looked around the room. We were wrong. Nexus 7's voice cut through the noise. Humans cannot survive without the council. You need our trade routes. You need our protection. Sarah laughed, and the sound was scary. Protection? From who? We have been protecting ourselves just fine. As for trade, we have been giving you more than we get back for decades. She picked up the papers again. This document officially ends all treaties between Earth and the Council. All trade agreements are canceled. All military cooperation is finished. And most importantly, all limits on human military forces are now gone. The chamber became very quiet. Everyone knew that humans had been forced to keep only small military forces. The Council had made sure humans could not fight back. Vorthak Prime's yellow eyes got narrow. You are making a mistake, human. There are thousands of species in this council. You are just one. Sarah nodded. You are right. We are just one species. But you know what makes humans different from all of you? She paused. We remember everything. Every insult, every betrayal, every time you made us look weak. She started walking toward the door. You wanted to see how peaceful humans could be. You got your answer. For 200 years, we have been the most peaceful species in the galaxy. At the door, she turned around one more time. Every alien in the chamber was staring at her. But you made one big mistake, she said. You thought peaceful meant weak. You thought quiet meant defeated. You thought we forgot how to fight." Her voice became very cold. "We never forgot. We were just being nice." Sarah opened the door to leave. "You wanted peace from humanity. Now you will have war." The door closed behind her with a loud bang. The council chamber stayed quiet for a long time. In her hotel room, Sarah took out her phone and sent a message. It was just 3 words. "Wake them up." On Earth, Admiral Marcus Torres was sitting in his office deep underground. The office was in a place that did not exist on any map. When his computer made a beeping sound, he smiled. He had been waiting for this message for 20 years. Torres typed in a long code on his keyboard. On screens around the world, the same message appeared in secret military bases. "Prometheus Protocol is now active. Repeat, Prometheus Protocol is now active." In hidden bases under the ocean, officers started pushing buttons. In caves on the moon, lights began to turn on. On asteroids that looked empty, doors began to open. For 200 years, the galaxy thought humanity had become weak. They thought humans had given up their weapons and their fighting spirit. They were wrong. Humanity had not become weak. They had been waiting, and now the waiting was over. Torres stood up and walked to the window of his office. Outside, he could see the Pacific Ocean. Somewhere far below the water, massive ships were starting to wake up, ships that were bigger and more powerful than anything the Council had ever seen. He picked up his phone and called all the other hidden bases. "This is Admiral Torres. Operation Prometheus begins now. It is time to show the galaxy what happens when you push humans too far." On his desk was a picture of Earth from space. It looked peaceful and blue, but Torres knew that looks could be fooling. Earth had never stopped being dangerous. It had just been pretending. The Council had taught humanity many things over the past 200 years. They had taught them how to be patient. They had taught them how to plan. They had taught them how to hide their true strength. But most importantly, they had taught humanity that being nice to bullies never worked. Torres looked at the picture one more time, then put it in his drawer. The time for being nice was over. The time for being human had begun. In space stations around the galaxy, other species were starting to get worried. Strange signals were coming from human space. Signals that had been quiet for 200 years were suddenly very loud. Some of the smarter aliens remembered the old stories about humans, stories about what they had been like before they joined the Council, stories about wars that had shaken the galaxy. But most aliens had forgotten these stories. They were about to remember them very quickly. The age of human peace was ending. The age of human war was about to begin. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in front of a computer screen that glowed blue in the dark room. She was 5 miles under the Pacific Ocean in a place that officially did not exist. Her hands shook as she typed in the codes that would change everything. The EU codes were very long and very secret. Only 5 people in the entire galaxy knew them. Elena had memorized them 20 years ago, hoping she would never have to use them. But today was different. Above her head, she could hear the ocean. Fish swam around, not knowing that below them was the biggest secret in human history. The Council thought they knew about all human military bases. They were wrong. Elena finished typing and put her hand on a scanner. A red light turned green. Then she spoke clearly into a microphone. "This is Dr. Elena Vasquez. Code Prometheus is authorized. Wake them all." Around the room, lights began to flash. Computers that had been sleeping for decades started to turn on. In the walls, she could hear the sound of massive machines beginning to work. Elena walked to a big window that looked out into the dark water. At first, she saw nothing. Then slowly, lights began to appear in the distance. Big lights, moving lights. The first ship that rose from the ocean floor was as long as a city. It had been hiding there for 200 years, covered in special metal that made it look like a mountain on the sea bottom. Now it was waking up. Elena watched as more ships began to rise, destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and in the deepest parts of the trench, something much bigger was starting to move. Her phone rang. It was Admiral Torres. "Elena, what is your status?" he asked. "Pacific Fleet is awakening, sir. All systems are green." The big one is starting to move now. Elena looked down into the darkness. Far below, the UES Retribution was rising. It was the biggest warship ever built by humans. The Council thought it had been destroyed 200 years ago. They were wrong about that too. At the same time, on the far side of the moon, Captain James Park was watching his own miracle happen. The lunar base looked like a small mining operation from the outside, but inside the moon it was something very different. Park stood in a control room carved from solid rock. Around him, his officers were pushing buttons and reading screens. Outside the thick windows, he could see space. But he was not looking at the stars, he was looking at the ships. They came out of hidden caves in the moon's surface. Sleek fighters that moved like deadly birds. Support ships loaded with weapons the Council had banned. And escort carriers that held squadrons of pilots who had been training in secret their whole lives. Luna Base to Earth Command, Park said, into his radio. Ghost Fleet is operational. 72 ships and counting. The Ghost Fleet was special. These ships were invisible to every scanner the Council used. They could fly right next to an enemy ship and never be detected. Human engineers had spent decades perfecting this technology, while pretending to be peaceful farmers and traders. In the asteroid belt, Colonel Sarah Kim was having her own awakening. Her base was built inside an asteroid that looked dead and empty. But the asteroid was hollow, and inside it was a factory that had been building ships for 50 years. Kim watched as the factory doors opened for the first time. The ships that came out were different from the others. They were black as space itself and covered in strange symbols. These were the Reaper ships, and they had one job: to destroy everything they touched. Asteroid Base 7 to Fleet Command, Kim reported. Reaper Squadron is ready. All 12 ships are armed and operational. Back on Earth, Admiral Torres was reading reports from 70 different bases. Each base had been hidden perfectly. Each base had been building and preparing while the galaxy thought humans were weak. Torres smiled as he read the numbers. The Council thought they had military superiority. They had 5,000 ships spread across the galaxy. But Torres was looking at reports of 8,000 human ships that had just awakened from their long sleep. And these were not ordinary ships. These were warships built with technology that was 200 years more advanced than anything the Council had. While the Council had been making rules and having meetings, humans had been working. Torres opened a communication channel to all the awakening fleets. On screens around the solar system, his face appeared. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began. "Today, we stop pretending. For 2 centuries, we have let the galaxy think we were weak. We have followed their rules. We have accepted their insults. We have let them push us around. In bases around the solar system, thousands of human officers listened. Many of them had never seen real combat. But they had been training for this day their entire lives. The Council believes they have tamed humanity," Torres continued. "They think we have forgotten how to fight. They think we have become soft and peaceful. Today we show them how wrong they are." Torres paused and looked directly into the camera. "They wanted to see what humans could do when we were peaceful. They got their answer. Now they will see what we can do when we are not." The Admiral pulled up a star map that showed the entire galaxy. Red dots marked Council military bases. Blue dots marked human targets. Operation Prometheus has 3 goals, Torres explained. First, we take back every human colony in the outer spiral. Second, we destroy the Council's ability to threaten Earth. Third, we make sure they never underestimate humanity again. Torres looked at the red dots on the map. There were hundreds of them. In a few hours, most of them would be gone. "Remember," he said, "we are not the same species that begged for peace 200 years ago. We are not the same humans who accepted their rules. We are something new, something they created by pushing us too far." The communication ended. Around the solar system, fleet commanders began giving orders. Ships that had been sleeping for decades started moving toward the edge of the system. Their destination, the outer spiral and the first Council bases that would fall. Dr. Vasquez was still watching from her. underwater base as the Pacific Fleet formed up. The ships moved in perfect formation like a school of deadly fish. At the front was the UES Retribution, so big it blocked out the sun above. She had helped design these ships when she was young. Back then, she thought they would never be used. She thought humanity would find a way to live in peace with the Council. She had been wrong. But as she watched the fleet disappear into hyperspace, Elena realized something important. The Council had made humanity into something much more dangerous than they had ever been before. They had given humans 200 years to plan, to prepare, and to remember every insult. Now humanity was going to collect on that debt. In the command center of the UES Retribution, Admiral Torres took his seat in the captain's chair. Around him, officers worked at stations controlling weapons that could destroy planets. The ship's AI spoke in a calm voice. "Admiral, all fleets are ready. Target coordinates have been confirmed. Ghost Fleet is in position. Reaper Squadron is standing by." Torres nodded. "Signal all ships. Operation Prometheus begins now." The first phase of humanity's return to war had begun. The Council was about to learn what happened when you cornered the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and then forgot why they were dangerous in the first place. Commander Seth Ka was bored. He had been sitting on Kepler Station for 3 years watching empty space. Nothing ever happened in this part of the outer spiral. The human colonies were gone. His job was just to make sure they stayed gone. Seth Ka was a Vorthak, 8 feet tall with green scales and sharp claws. His people were warriors, but there had been no wars to fight for many years. The Council had made sure of that. They kept the peace by keeping everyone weak. The commander was reading reports when his screen started flashing red. His officer, a younger Vorthak named Kreshta, looked up from his station. "Sir, I am getting strange readings from the edge of the system." Seth Ka sighed. "What kind of readings?" "Gravitational anomalies. Very big ones. But there should be nothing out there." The commander walked over to look at the screen. The numbers made no sense. According to the sensors, there were massive objects moving toward them, but space was empty. He could see it through the station windows. "Run a diagnostic on the sensors," he ordered. "They must be broken." Kreshta worked for several minutes, then looked up with worry in his yellow eyes. "Sir, the sensors are working perfectly. Whatever is out there, it is very big and moving very fast." Seth Ka was about to answer when every alarm on the station began screaming. The lights went red. Officers ran to their battle stations, and on the main screen something impossible appeared. Ships. Dozens of them. They had appeared from nowhere, like ghosts becoming real. But these were not ghost ships. They were massive human warships, and their weapons were already glowing with deadly energy. "All stations battle alert," Seth Ka shouted. "Launch all fighters, raise shields, send a distress signal to the fleet." But it was too late. The human ships fired before the Vorthak could react. Beams of pure energy cut through space and hit the station's shields. The shields, which were supposed to stop any attack, vanished, like soap bubbles. Kreshta screamed as his station exploded. "Sir, their weapons are too powerful. Our shields cannot stop them." Seth Ka grabbed the communications console. "This is Kepler Station to all Council forces. We are under attack by human ships. They have weapons that can—" His words were cut off as the station shook. More human ships had appeared, surrounding them completely. On the main screen, he could see the lead ship. It was bigger than 3 Vorthak battleships put together. From that ship came a voice. It spoke in perfect Vorthak language but with a human accent. "Kepler Station, this is Admiral Jiang Wei of the United Earth Forces. You have 30 seconds to evacuate all personnel. After that, your station will be destroyed." Seth Ka's blood became cold. "This is Commander Seth Ka. We are a peaceful research station. We have families here, children." 20 seconds, the human voice said calmly. Around the station, escape pods began launching. Vorthak families ran for the evacuation ships. But Seth Ka and his senior officers stayed at their posts. They were warriors. They would not run. 10 seconds. Seth Ka opened all communication channels. "To any Council forces listening, this is Kepler Station. The humans have returned. They have weapons we cannot fight. They are not the same species that left. Beware. Beware of... The station disappeared in a ball of white light. When the light faded, there was nothing left but glowing particles. The most heavily defended Vorthak position in the outer spiral had been destroyed in 17 minutes. Admiral Zhang Wei watched from the bridge of the UES Righteous Fury. Around him, his officers monitored the other attacks happening across 12 star systems. Each attack was going exactly as planned. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "all primary targets have been eliminated. Ghost Fleet reports successful strikes on communication arrays. The Council cannot warn their inner systems." Zhang nodded. "What about civilian casualties?" "Zero, sir. All evacuation operations were successful. No non-military personnel were harmed." This was important to Zhang. Humans were not monsters. They killed soldiers and destroyed military targets, but they always gave civilians a chance to escape. It was one of the things that made them different from their enemies. "Phase 2 is now authorized," Zhang announced. "Begin the occupation of all human colonies." Across the outer spiral, human fleets were arriving at planets that had been taken from them. But these planets were not empty. Millions of aliens had moved in after the humans were forced to leave. On the planet New California, Governor Thex Ree was having dinner when his aide burst into the room. The aide was a small, furry creature called a Pesk. Governor, ships in orbit, human ships." Thex Ree was a calm leader. He had governed this planet for 10 years without any problems. "How many ships?" 57, sir. "Big ones." The governor frowned. That was impossible. Humans only had a few small ships for system defense. Everyone knew that. "Are you sure they are human ships?" Before the aide could answer, every communication device in the building began broadcasting the same message. The voice was human, speaking in perfect galactic standard. "This is Captain Sarah Park of the United Earth Forces. New California is now under human military control. All non-human residents have 24 hours to evacuate safely. Transportation will be provided. Anyone who remains after the deadline will be considered an enemy combatant." Thex Ree ran to his window and looked up at the sky. He could see lights moving among the stars. Human ships. More than he had ever imagined existed. His aide was trembling. "What do we do, sir?" Thex Ree thought for a moment. He had 12,000 aliens living on this planet. His own people, plus Vorthak farmers, Nexus researchers, and others. He could not fight 57 warships. "Begin the evacuation," he said sadly. "Contact all the transport ships in the system. We are leaving." Similar scenes were happening on dozens of worlds. Alien governors and colonists who had taken over human planets were being politely but firmly told to leave. Most of them went peacefully. They had heard what happened to Kepler Station, but some tried to fight. On the mining world of Titan's Rest, a Vorthak military commander named Gorth Ra decided to make a stand. He had 200 soldiers and some heavy weapons. He thought that would be enough to hold off the humans until the Council fleet arrived. He was wrong. The human landing forces came down from orbit like falling stars. They moved faster than any soldiers Gorth Ra had ever seen. Their weapons cut through Vorthak armor like it was paper. Worst of all, they seemed to know exactly where every Vorthak position was. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, Gorth Ra was the only Vorthak left alive. The humans had captured him and brought him to their commander. "I am Colonel James Mitchell," the human said. He was smaller than Gorth Ra, but something about his eyes was scary. "Your soldiers fought bravely. They will be treated with honor." Gorth Ra hissed. "Where are they? What have you done with my warriors?" "They are in medical facilities," Mitchell replied. "Human weapons are designed to disable, not kill. Your people will recover." This confused Gorth Ra. In Vorthak culture, defeated enemies were killed or enslaved. "Why do you let them live?" Mitchell looked out at the planet where human colonists were already returning to their old homes. "Because we are not you. We fight when we have to. We kill when we must, but we take no pleasure in it." The colonel turned back to Gorth Ra. "Tell your council what you have seen here. Tell them that humanity has returned. Tell them that we are Not the same species they remember. On Earth, Admiral Torres was reading reports from all 12 target systems. Every operation had been successful. The entire outer spiral was back under human control, and they had done it without killing a single civilian. But Torres knew this was just the beginning. The real test would come when the Council's main fleets arrived. They would not give up their territory without a fight. Torres opened a communication to all human forces. Phase 1 is complete. All assigned territories have been liberated. Prepare for Phase 2. The Council will respond with force. When they do, we will show them what human military technology can really do. In the Council chambers, emergency alarms were ringing. Counselor Vorthak Prime was screaming orders, while Nexus 7 processed incoming data at superhuman speed. 12 systems lost in 72 hours, Nexus 7 reported. Human technological capabilities exceed our estimates by 340%. Vorthak Prime's scales were dark with anger. Impossible. Our combined fleets are 50 times larger than theirs. From the observation deck, Admiral Jiang Wei watched the chaos with calm eyes. He had been sent by Earth to observe the Council's reaction. What he saw was panic, confusion, and fear. "Counselors," he said quietly, but his voice carried across the chamber. "You wanted to know what humans are capable of when we stop being peaceful. Now you know." Vorthak Prime turned to face him. "This aggression will not stand. The full might of the Council will crush your tiny fleets." Jiang smiled the same cold smile that Sarah Chen had used when she left the Council. "Counselor, you have been watching us for 200 years. You think you know what we can do. You think you understand human military power." He paused and looked around the chamber at all the frightened aliens. "You have seen nothing yet." The Nexus Collective had always believed they were untouchable. Their homeworld existed in folded space, hidden in a dimension that normal ships could not reach. For 1,000 years, no enemy had ever broken through their defenses. Nexus Prime floated in the center of their crystal city. Its consciousness spread across millions of interconnected nodes. It was the heart of the collective, a being of pure thought and energy. Around it, other Nexus beings worked to coordinate their war against humanity. "The human fleets have taken the outer spiral," reported Nexus 12. "But they cannot reach us. Here. Our dimensional barriers are absolute." Nexus Prime's crystal body pulsed with calm light. "Humans are creatures of crude matter. They cannot comprehend our higher dimensional science. We are safe, but far away, on a secret research station hidden in Earth's asteroid belt, Dr. Sarah Kim was proving them wrong." Sarah had been working on dimensional science for 30 years. The Council had always dismissed human research as primitive mathematics. They thought humans were too simple to understand advanced physics. Like everything else, they were wrong. Sarah stood in her laboratory, looking at equations that covered every wall. These were not primitive mathematics. These were formulas that could tear holes in reality itself. "Computer, run simulation 14,612, she said. The computer's voice was calm. "Warning, this simulation may cause dimensional instability. Do you wish to proceed?" "Yes." On the screen, Sarah watched as her quantum equations played out. The math was beautiful and terrible. It showed how to collapse the barriers between dimensions, how to make folded space unfold, how to reach things that thought they were unreachable. Sarah smiled. The Nexus had taught themselves to hide in higher dimensions, but they had forgotten something important. Dimensions could be destroyed. Her phone rang. It was Admiral Torres. "Sarah, are you ready?" "The quantum cascade generator is prepared," she replied. "One ship can carry it. When it activates, it will collapse the dimensional barriers around Nexus space." "What about the ship that carries it?" Sarah paused. "The ship will be destroyed, and probably anyone on it." Torres was quiet for a moment. "I see. How long do we have after activation?" 6 hours, maybe 7. The cascade will take time to reach. "Full power. That should be enough. Prepare the device. I will find volunteers for the mission." The next day, Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus. It was a small ship compared to the great warships of the human fleet, but it carried the most important weapon humanity had ever built. Around her, the crew worked, quietly. They all knew this was a one-way mission. The quantum cascade generator would tear their ship apart when it activated, but someone had to get close enough to the Nexus dimensional gate to make it work. "Captain," reported the navigation officer, "we are approaching the target coordinates." Through the front window, Maria could see nothing, just empty space. But according to the sensors, there was a massive gateway here. The entrance to Nexus space was invisible to normal eyes. "Begin scanning sequence," Maria ordered. The ship's computers worked for several minutes, mapping energy patterns that existed in dimensions humans could not see. Slowly, the outline of the gate began to appear on the main screen. It was enormous, like a hole in space itself. "Quantum devices ready, Captain," reported the weapons officer. Maria took a deep breath. "Signal Earth Command. Tell them we are beginning the attack." Far away, Admiral Torres received the message. He immediately opened communications to the entire human fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Torres. Operation Cascade begins now. In 6 hours, the Nexus barriers will fall. When they do, we go in, fast and hard. No mercy, no hesitation. The Nexus Collective ends today." Back at the dimensional gate, Maria gave the final order. "Activate the quantum cascade generator." The device powered up with a sound like reality screaming. Space around. The Prometheus began to twist and bend. Colors that had no names appeared in the darkness, and slowly the invisible gate began to become visible. Inside Nexus space, alarms began ringing for the first time in 1,000 years. Nexus Prime felt the dimensional barriers beginning to weaken. "This is impossible. No species has this technology. Humans have somehow learned to manipulate dimensional physics," reported Nexus 7. "Our protective barriers are collapsing." Around the Crystal City, Nexus beings began to panic. They were creatures of pure energy, used to being safe in their higher dimension. They had no experience with real danger, but Nexus Prime was different. It had existed for 800 years and remembered the old wars. "Prepare all defense systems. If the barriers fall, we fight." The Crystal City began to change. Weapons that had been sleeping for centuries came online. Energy barriers powered up around important buildings. Warrior constructs, beings of living crystal designed for combat, activated in their storage chambers. But the Nexus had made one crucial mistake. They had designed their defenses to fight in higher dimensional space. They had never considered what would happen if someone forced them to fight in normal space. 6 hours later, the barriers collapsed completely. Admiral Torres watched from the bridge of the UES Retribution as the Nexus homeworld suddenly appeared in normal space. It was beautiful and terrible, a planet made entirely of living crystal that pulsed with its own light. "All ships, attack formation," Torres ordered. "Remember, these beings are made of energy. Use quantum weapons only. Conventional weapons will not work." The human fleet moved toward the crystal planet like a swarm of angry hornets. But as they got closer, the Nexus defenses opened fire. Energy beams that could melt steel shot out from the planet's surface. Force fields tried to crush the human ships. Warrior constructs launched themselves into space, their crystal bodies bristling with weapons. But the humans had prepared for this. Every ship carried quantum destabilizers, weapons designed specifically to fight energy beings. When they fired, the Nexus warriors simply dissolved into nothing. Captain Jennifer Walsh commanded one of the assault squadrons. Her job was to land on the planet and capture the central processing center where Nexus Prime lived. "Landing ships, prepare for assault," she announced. "Remember, these beings can control electronics. Use manual weapons only." The landing ships dove toward the crystal surface like falling meteors. Nexus defense systems tried to stop them, but the ships were covered in quantum shielding that made them immune to energy attacks. Walsh's ship crashed through the roof of a crystal building and landed in a chamber filled with floating Nexus beings. The beings tried to attack with beams of pure thought, but the human soldiers were wearing special helmets that blocked mental attacks. "Advance to the central core," Walsh ordered. "Use shock weapons only." The human soldiers moved through the crystal city like a force of nature. Their weapons fired electromagnetic pulses that disrupted the Nexus beings' energy patterns. Everywhere they went, crystal structures went dark as their occupants were forced into emergency hibernation. But as they got closer to the center, the resistance became stronger. Nexus Prime had called all its power to itself, becoming a being of terrible energy that could destroy matter with a thought. Walsh and her team entered the central chamber to find a creature of living light waiting for them. Nexus Prime spoke without words, its voice appearing directly in their minds. "You cannot defeat me, humans. I am beyond your crude matter. I am pure consciousness." Walsh raised her weapon, a quantum disruptor the size of a small cannon. "Maybe, but consciousness needs something to live in. And we brought something that eats energy." She fired. The weapon released a wave of quantum static that began to tear apart Nexus Prime's energy matrix. The being screamed, a sound that existed in dimensions beyond hearing. "Impossible! You are primitive creatures. You cannot have this technology." Walsh smiled grimly. "You're right. We couldn't have built this 50 years ago. But you gave us 50 years to learn. You gave us time to study your weaknesses. You gave us time to figure out how to kill gods." The quantum disruptor fired again. This time, Nexus Prime's form began to flicker and fade. The great consciousness that had ruled the collective for centuries was dying. "Wait," it pleaded. "We can negotiate. We can share our knowledge. Humans and Nexus can work together." Walsh shook her head. "Too late for that. You had your chance to work with us. You chose to help the Council instead." The final shot reduced Nexus Prime to scattered particles of fading light. Around the crystal planet, the other Nexus beings felt their leader die. Without Nexus Prime to coordinate them, they became confused and helpless. Admiral Torres received the victory report while standing on the bridge of his flagship. "Sir, Nexus Prime is confirmed destroyed. The collective is in complete disarray. The planet is ours." Torres nodded. "What about survivors?" "Most of the Nexus beings have gone into hibernation mode. They seem to be too shocked to fight. Some are asking to surrender." "Accept their surrender. Place them in quantum containment fields until we can figure out what to do with them." Torres looked out at the crystal planet that had once been untouchable. Human ships were landing on its surface, and human soldiers were taking control of its cities. The Nexus Collective had been the most advanced species in the Council. They had technology that seemed like magic. They had power that could reshape reality itself. 6 months had passed since humanity left the peace accords. The galaxy was burning, and everyone knew who had lit the fire. The Vorthak Empire, once mighty rulers of half the galaxy, now controlled only 3 star systems. Their great fleets were scattered debris floating in space. The survivors hid on their homeworld, waiting for the humans to come for them too. The Nexus Collective existed only as stored consciousness in backup crystals, begging anyone who would listen to give them new bodies. Most species ignored them. Being friends with the Nexus was dangerous now. 17 smaller Council species had already surrendered to Earth. They sent ships full of gold, rare metals, and technology, hoping humanity would leave them alone. Some offered their own children as hostages to prove their loyalty. But all of this was nothing compared to what happened when the UES Reckoning arrived at the Council's homeworld. The ship was impossible to understand. It was bigger than some moons, a massive structure of metal and energy that blocked out stars when it moved. Weapons covered its surface like scales on a dragon. When it appeared in orbit, 3 different planets felt their gravity change. On the Council homeworld, panic ruled the streets. Alien civilians ran for evacuation ships. Government buildings emptied as officials fled to bunkers deep underground. The proud council chambers, where humanity had been humiliated for 2 centuries, became an empty shell. But some council members stayed. They gathered in an emergency bunker beneath the capital city, surrounded by the strongest shields their technology could build. It was not much protection against what was coming, but it was all they had. Councillor Vorthak Prime sat at the head of the table, his green scales darker than they had ever been. Around him sat the survivors of what had once been the most powerful government in the galaxy. Now they looked like frightened children. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked. General Kesto, a Vorthak military commander, looked at his report with shame. 300 ships total from all species combined. Most are damaged. Many crews have deserted. Vorthak Prime hissed in anger. "We started with 5,000 ships. The humans have destroyed or captured the rest," Kesto replied quietly. Counselor. Althea 9, one of the few surviving Nexus beings, spoke through her damaged crystal body. "Human technology exceeds our understanding. They have weapons that rewrite physics, ships that cannot be detected, soldiers that fight like machines but think like artists." The bunker shook as something massive landed on the surface above them. Through the thick walls they could hear the sound of human transport ships arriving. Vorthak Prime stood up slowly. "They have come to demand our surrender." "What choice do we have?" asked Counselor Brika, a small furry being whose species had once been powerful traders. "They have proven they can destroy anyone who opposes them." The bunker's communication system activated. A human voice spoke in perfect galactic standard. "Council. Members, this is General Patricia Stone of the United Earth Forces. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. If you refuse, this planet will be pacified by force." Vorthak Prime activated the reply system. "General Stone, we wish to negotiate terms." "There are no terms," came the cold reply. "Unconditional, surrender or total destruction. You have 59 minutes to decide." The council members looked at each other with despair. This was not how negotiations were supposed to work. For 1,000 years, the council had made deals, traded favors, and found compromises. But humans apparently did not believe in compromise anymore. Above ground, General Stone watched as her troops took control of the planetary defense grid. Human soldiers moved through the city with the precision of a machine. They secured government buildings, communications centers, and military bases without firing a shot. The few alien security forces that remained simply surrendered when they saw the humans coming. Stone was a veteran of the Nexus campaign. She had seen what happened to species that tried to fight humanity. She preferred when enemies were smart enough to give up. Her aide, Colonel Martinez, approached with a report. "General, all strategic locations are secured. Local population is cooperating fully. No resistance encountered." Stone nodded. "Good. Any word from the council bunker?" "They are still discussing surrender terms, ma'am." Stone checked her watch. "They have 43 minutes left. After that, we use the planet crackers." Martinez looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, there are still millions of civilians on this world." "Then the council better make the right choice," Stone replied without emotion. In the bunker, the debate was becoming desperate. Some council members wanted to fight to the end. Others begged for mercy. But slowly they all came to the same conclusion. "We cannot win," Althea 9 said finally. "Humans have become something we cannot fight. They have turned war into a science." Vorthak Prime slammed his clawed hand on the table. "This is not how civilized species behave. There must be rules. There must be limits." "Humans never accepted our rules," replied Counselor Dexmar, a wise old creature whose species had first formed the council. "We forced those rules on them. Now they are showing us what happens when someone stronger makes the rules." The bunker shook again. On the surface, something very large was moving. Brika was crying, her fur wet with tears. "My children are on this planet. My grandchildren. If we do not surrender, they will all die." Vorthak Prime looked around the table at the faces of the survivors. They were defeated, not just militarily, but spiritually. The council that had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years was broken. "Very well," he said slowly. "We surrender." An hour later, the council survivors were brought to the surface. What they saw there made them understand just how completely they had lost. Human soldiers stood in perfect formations throughout the city. Human ships filled the sky so completely that day looked like night. And in the center of the main plaza stood a platform where the human delegation waited. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the center of the platform. She wore the same black suit she had worn when she left the council chambers 6 months ago. But now she looked different. She looked like a person who had won a war. Behind her stood Admiral Torres, General Stone, and a dozen other human officers. They watched as the council members were brought forward like prisoners. Vorthak Prime tried to maintain his dignity as he climbed onto the platform. Ambassador Chen, we are prepared to discuss terms of surrender. Sarah smiled, but it was not a kind smile. There are no discussions, Counselor. There are only my terms and your acceptance of them. She gestured to an aide who handed her a document. The outer spiral now belongs to humanity, permanently. All human colonies that were taken by the Council are returned to Earth control. All trade routes through human space will be taxed at rates determined by Earth. Vorthak Prime's scales rippled with anger, but he said nothing. Sarah continued reading. The Council will continue to exist, but all major decisions must be approved by a human representative. Military forces of all Council species are limited to system defense only. And most importantly, no Council law may restrict human activities without human consent. This is not surrender, Vorthak Prime hissed. This is slavery. Sarah looked up from the document. No, Counselor. Slavery is what you tried to do to us. This is justice. She handed the document to Vorthak Prime. You wanted to see what humans were capable of when we stopped being peaceful. You got your answer. We are capable of conquering the entire galaxy in 6 months. The Vorthak leader took the document with shaking hands. And if we refuse? Admiral Torres stepped forward. Then we activate the planet crackers and start over with whatever species survives. Your choice. Vorthak Prime looked at the document, then at the human ships filling the sky, then at his fellow council members. They all nodded slowly. What choice did they have? The council accepts these terms, he said quietly. Sarah nodded. Excellent. Now let me explain what happens next. She gestured to the ships above them. Those are not just warships. They are also construction vessels, medical ships, and research platforms. Because unlike you, we understand that destroying something is only useful if you plan to build something better. Sarah walked to the edge of the platform where she could see the entire city. We are going to help you rebuild what this war destroyed. We are going to share technology that will make your worlds better places to live. We are going to create a galaxy where every species can prosper. She turned back to the council members. But it will be a galaxy where humans make the rules, where human interests come first, where no one ever again makes the mistake of thinking we are weak. Vorthak Prime stared at her. Why? Why help us after defeating us? Sarah's expression became thoughtful. Because that is what makes us human, Counselor. We are capable of great violence when we must be, but we are also capable of great mercy when we choose to be. She looked up at the massive human fleet. You spent 2 centuries teaching us that mercy was weakness. You were wrong. Mercy is strength that chooses not to destroy when it could. Sarah walked back to the center of the platform. But do not mistake mercy for softness. Do not think that, because we choose to help you, we have become weak again. We remember everything, every insult, every betrayal, every time you made us kneel. Her voice became hard as steel. We will be fair rulers. We will be just. But we will never again be victims.